I want to experiment a bit with the batching mechanism in React 18. On the Discord I hang out on, a question came up whether the use state and use reducer state updates batch together. When I was reading the documentation on the batching mechanism, I don't recall any mentioning of there being a difference, so my base assumption is they do. It's not that hard to test. I don't intend to go and read the actual batching mechanism code. Might be interesting, but for the sake of this exploration, I just going to play a bit with state updates and see how it behaves. I set up I just ran create React app. It's a TypeScript project. There's nothing set up. Well, I added ESLint because I always do. And yeah, let's try it out. So, going to remove all this. Don't need it. Let's print out something to the console so that we can see if it does a re-render or not. Since it'll rerun the entire function, it'll always rerun this. I can see that we have strict mode enabled. Let's get rid of strict mode. So just, yeah, ESLint does that sometimes. The autofix and the hot reloading don't necessarily always play together. Anyway, we got one render statement here. Let's add a button so that we can cause some sort of action or trigger our updates. Just an on click. Let's just do. Let's just log out that we actually were clicked. Let's give this button also a text. So if we click this, we'll get a output of in our console that we did indeed click the button. Let's add some state. Some state. And I'm going to use a... What did I do here? I was thinking about writing the hook, so I wrote the hook and... Yeah, anyway. I'm going to use a number because it's easy to increment and we can guarantee that we update every on every click that way. Let's just increment our counter by 1. When we click, I expect to see 1 click, 1 render. 1 click, 1 render. If I click it again, the same happens. Now, if we call this hook twice, we should see the same thing. I'm more interested in having 2 hooks, 2 state updates. This I also fully expect is only going to render once on a click, which we see that it does. I should probably zoom into this a bit. Not that it's that interesting, it's just a button. Then let's also add our reducer. Let's give it a value. Yeah, I'm also just going to use a numeric value in this case. I could directly use a number, but I mean, if you use a reducer, you might as well use an object. And we need our reducing function. This is a record of string number, and our action is just any. We don't actually care about our actions, and we are going to return our previous state, and from our previous state the value plus 1 will assign to value, like so. Let's format this. so that it all fits neatly in a line. And call our dispatch here. We don't care about the input. I fully expect that this will batch together, so if I click, we should still see only one render, which is what we do. Now I'd like to add 2 more experiments. One's on a promise where the executor does the update immediately. I'm not sure what to expect there. It probably batches, but it might not. And the other experiment is with a timeout. There I fully expect we actually see a second render. I'd be very surprised if we don't see one. Basically everything I know about React would be probably wrong then. So let's create a promise. With a executor, and in here let's just resolve it to our dispatch, which just takes any argument. Let's take that dispatch away just in case, and we still get 1 render. So if the executor runs immediately instead of scheduling in the event queue, it does still batch together. Which also tells us that we can nest functions and have it in called by different components or different. If we abstract away our logic into the if we abstract it away into a different file or a controller or whatever, it'll still only be 1 update and batched together. Now, if we put a set timeout in here, just to convince ourselves that we indeed aren't making a mistake here, that we'll actually get a second render, for example. And we do get a second render. We can see it's the 2 here. If I actually log out the state, it will be a bit more clear. Some states 2, and state, for example. The reason it's going to be clearer is because it won't collapse them together. And also the second state's going to be different. Yeah, so as we can see, it seems to batch them all together within the current event process cycle. So unless it goes back to the event queue and processes the next event in the queue, it probably will batch them all together. That's my conclusion, and that is it for this experiment.